Ladies and gentlemen, I have sat down calmly and listened to the presentation of Mr. Senor, and I'm most impressed. And I must say, from the very get-go, that I appreciate the presentation, and indeed, I share similar sentiments as expressed by him. I would dare say that I agree with him, perhaps not in totality, because a few strands that I may disagree with. But I can safely say that to a large measure, perhaps over 90%, I agree with what he has said. When I first got the topic, the impending death of the Fourth Republic, my face immediately contorted, and I asked my PA, who had relayed the topic to me, what it was supposed to mean. I asked whether it's in respect of the overhaul of the Constitution, or perhaps the death of constitutionalism in Ghana. And either of them is ominous, is dangerous to the health of Ghana as a republic. Colleagues, if we didn't know the Constitution, we've learned a lot about the presentation, from the presentation of Senor. So we do know the 1992 Constitution. But what is the anchor of the 1992 Republican Constitution? I think there are matters that we should be interrogating. The anchor, in my view, is the framework of government, and Senor spoke eloquently to that, which sustainably secures for the citizens of today, tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow, the blessings of liberty, equality of opportunity, and prosperity. The principal strands of the anchor are one, the executive, the legislature, the judiciary, the council of state. Besides these are also the constitutional creatures, the electoral commission, the media commission, commission for human rights and administrative justice, the national commission for civic education, the public services, the armed forces, the auditor general. Finally, one cannot be unmindful of the defined role for our chiefs under Chapter 22 of the Constitution. We have practiced the 1992 Constitution for close to 30 years now. The question to ask ourselves is whether the various strands are firmly in place, effectively and efficiently functional, and contributing to the smooth functioning of the greater whole. Or is it the case that some of the strands are loosening up or are exfoliating or peeling off? Do some of the strands need tightening up or repairing, or do they require retrofitting? For the executive, the country needs a head of state and head of government. Therefore, at any given time, we shall have a president or a prime minister. There is an empirical study by the World Bank which suggests that small unitary countries are better served with prime ministers as heads of state other than presidents. A president has the whole country as his constituency, whereas a prime minister operates from his own small cell. When the parliamentary leader wins and his party wins majority of seats in parliament, he becomes the prime minister. His campaign purse is a microcosm as compared to the president's campaign wardrobe. There is a nexus between huge campaign expenditure and what we have bemoaning, corruption, through the award of contracts. What therefore should be our preference pursuant to good governance? We shouldn't shy away from this topic. In a strict presidential system, ministers are appointed from outside parliament. The US is the flagship of presidential systems. Invariably, their ministers are all technical people who, when they come to be appointed, are able to assist the president in the determination of policy of government, as provided for by Article 76, sub 2 of our Constitution, and also for the efficient running of the country, as per Article 78. These are experts. They are technical people. They are professionals who add value to governance. In the Westminster system, as my colleague, and indeed, that's my own preference, in the Westminster system, the Prime Minister appoints ministers for the same purpose. That is the determination of general policy of government, and also to run the state efficiently. The ministers in the Westminster system are not necessarily technocrats, but they are often long-serving members of parliament who have served committees for very long periods, perhaps risen to become shadow ministers in their various sectors, and they become authorities in the subject areas. But we are operating a hybrid, not Westminster, not presidential. So we appoint ministers. They come before Parliament's appointment committee. Rudimentary questions are asked. And they tell us, oh, I don't know, you let me go there, I'll learn. How much time to learn on the job in order to position yourself to be able to advise the president on technical matters? So we're not adding value to our governance. And the fault is not in our stars. The fault is in us. I think that the time has come to mend and amend. Hasn't the time also come for us to place in the Constitution an upper limit to the number of ministers that we have? The point is, bills, agreements that come before parliaments are predicated on policies and principles. These policies and principles are shaped by cabinet ministers. So if you're not a cabinet minister, you cannot technically sponsor a bill in parliament because you're not part of the shaping and evolution of the policy and principle. So how come when the Constitution places a ceiling of 19 cabinet ministers, you may have outside the regional ministers, perhaps 40, 45 ministers? What's the relevance? And all presidents since 1993 have had ministers who have gone beyond the limit of 90. How come? And Senor was talking about the V8s. But let's face it, they add to the burden on the consolidated fund. So let's face it. The same colleagues, the Constitution provides that whenever the president is absent from Ghana or for any reason is unable to perform the functions of office, the vice president shall perform the functions of the president until the president returns. That's the absence, the mere absence of the president from Ghana, mean inability to perform the functions of the office of the president. This cannot be in this technological age or in situations where the president exits the jurisdiction to perform the functions of the president anyway. So we really need to interrogate these matters. And shouldn't it be better for us to also assess the competence of any minister or deputy minister if that person is reshuffled from one ministry to the other? A person is ushered or maybe allocated a ministry, and the appointment committee vets that person by the competence of that person for that sector. When a person is being moved away, the minister is being moved away from agric to say finance, he doesn't have to come to parliament. How are we able to assess the competence of that person in the new area that he's going to? So you see, we allow the president to also engage in trial and error. From Rawlings through Kufuor, Mills, John Mahama, and the current president. Let's face it, the fault is not in our stars. As for the powers vested in the president, I disagree with Senor, and I agree with my colleague, They are huge and humongous. They are huge and humongous. And we must find a way, really, to deal with that situation. Otherwise, we create for ourselves a constitutional monster. And perhaps that is what is giving cause to the declarations of a do-or-die contest or die-be-die contest. Because it's winner takes all. It's winner takes all. Colleagues, and I'm happy that we've talked about the role or the position of the National Development Planning Commission. The National Development Planning Commission is a vital cog in the development agenda of this country. the broad architecture of our national development is provided by the directive principle of state policy, expressed in the broad ambit of the political objectives, economic objectives, social objectives, educational objectives, cultural objectives, and international relations. The National Development Planning Commission is mandated to craft a long-term development plan from these development themes for the nation, based upon which the various political parties are required to craft their manifestos. And that is what is expressed in Article 55(3) of the Constitution. When this has been achieved, then the relevance of Article 35(7) will kick in. That is what my colleague quoted. As far as practicable, a government shall continue and execute projects and programs commenced by the previous governments. But where these foundations are not provided, they will resort to their manifestos. And this has become difficult to achieve because the political parties have no guide from the NDPC. On the part of the NDPC, it is not for want of trying. The truth of the matter, however, is that the very composition of the NDPC, as provided under Article 86, makes it politically tainted ab initio. Yes. That's the problem. The NDPC, respectfully, is like, Dr. Buchi, respectfully, the NDPC is like a chamber pot. Regardless of the quality of its content, nobody wants to eat from it, even if it's directly from the factory. That is what it is. Let's look at the composition of the NDPC as expressed in the Constitution. If we don't do that, it will be child's play. And regardless of the quality of job, as done, started by J.H. Mensah and Professor Dewenchiman, Professor Jambafo, continued ably by under Dr. Boji, it will be an exercise in futility, as we are witnessing. Let's look at Article 86 of the Constitution. And I agree with the Electoral Commission that we should have a second look at it. One, the Constitution of the Commission, because it agitates a lot of people. We should look at that. And also the responsibility of the Commission to demarcate electoral boundaries for both national and local government elections, as expressed in Article 45(b) of the Constitution. And of course, if you look at the Article 47(5), it talks about the review of the division of Ghana into constituencies at intervals of not less than 7 years or within 12 months after the publication of the enumeration figures, after the holding of a census of the population of Ghana, whichever is earlier, and may, as a result, alter the constituencies. It is my contention that when the Constitution talks about, in Article 47(5), altering the boundaries of constituencies, it doesn't necessarily mean increasing the numbers of constituencies. At the very outset of the Fourth Republic, this country had 140 constituencies, increased to 200, by 60 to 200, and we all know, to provide a cushion for the transition. Dr. Bochi, I'm not lying, am I? To provide a cushion for the transition. And then under Kufuor, it came to be increased by 30. So from 140 to 200, that is increased by 60 at the very beginning, to 200, and then 230, and now 275. Where are we heading towards? Because we now have a census. Are we going to increase? I want to contend that this is not sustainable. Because if we have to go along what the Electoral Commission had been doing, and it's the reason why when they went before the Supreme Court, they were not able to define for us the population quota of this nation. Dr. Afrejan, with respect to him, decided to ignore that person. It's the population quota of the country that must be changing continuously, not the number of constituencies that we have in this country. Otherwise, every 20 years, we may have to build a new chamber for Parliament. And I know building the chamber will come with a hashtag, drop the chamber. So, colleagues, let's be realistic and let's not play ostriches. Also to the political parties, the method of choosing parliamentary candidates. I think you must interrogate these matters. You must interrogate these matters. Because I want to believe that it is these things that are not helping to grow Parliament. And Dr. Rashid, your organization, you conducted a research some time back, in spite of our glory, when you assessed the parliaments in Africa. Ghana did not occupy any good position. I think we placed last but one in the exercise that you conducted. Of 13 countries, or was it 12 countries, Dr. Rashid, that we did in assessing the strength of the parliaments in Africa. It's because the assigned roles of parliament, one, legislation, two, providing oversight. How have we been performing? And it's the reason we are not looking at maybe having very good materials to come to Parliament. The parties are surrendering authority, leaving everything to the constituency parties, where, unfortunately, many of the people down there are looking at the size of the wallets of people and not really looking at competence. And when you have such situations, you will have people come to populate Parliament who think that even where they disagree, they must exhibit brawn power and not brain power.
In defense of the Constitution.
In defense of the Constitution. You see, Dr. Yini, he has a very uncanny ability of justifying the unjustifiable. we must own up to it. What is right, what is wrong. There can't be any justification for this shameful conduct from members of Parliament. You cannot. So, distinguished colleagues, the IPU, for instance, is indicating to us that by 2025, we should have at least 30% women representation in all parliaments. And that, if we fail to comply into 2025, at the World Assembly of Parliaments, that is called the Interparliamentary Union, countries or jurisdiction parliaments that don't conform would be reduced to observer status. Is that what we want for Ghana? But with this first passport system, how are we going to surmount this challenge? We cannot. We cannot. So I want to believe that if we need to really surmount this challenge, we must again interrogate the Constitution. Is the first passport going to yield this product? Or should we go the way of proportional representation? Or is there any other better recourse to us as a country? We must strengthen Parliament. We must reposition Parliament in order to be able to confront the executive. We are not doing that. And that's why members of Parliament are behaving like timorous souls. It's not only members of Parliament whose parties are in the executive. Even members of Parliament whose parties are in the opposition. They are all timorous souls. Because you don't want to incur the displeasure of the person that you think perhaps may emerge as your presidential candidate. And if he becomes the presidential candidate and he enters his kingdom, he may not remember you. So you don't want to incur the displeasure of that person. So regardless of whatever he says, rightly or wrongly, you are forced to obey. And that is the bane of our democracy. For now, we are having an avalanche of bills coming to Parliament. I'm afraid of what trends that we're setting, whether Parliament wants to set itself on a collision course with the executive. Because the imperatives of Article 108 are very clear, that if you're bringing a bill to Parliament that will exact funding from the consolidated fund, they should come from the executive. But there is an avalanche of bills in Parliament today. I don't know, when you have passed the budget, and such a bill comes, not factored into the budget, how is it to be funded? We must be careful as a Parliament. The Then lately there are issues about immunity from service of process and arrest. Some members of parliament have had encounters with the law enforcement agencies. Previous speakers have had a way about it. But lately there are some wranglings dominating the airwaves relating to witch hunting. In the face of Article 117 of the Constitution, what should be the appropriate defined path for MPs who breach the law? We must sort this out in a better way to prevent what others may refer to as unwarranted damparic intrusions into parliament. We should find a way, because it can't also be that members breach the law, because all Ghanaians should be equal before the law. And all Ghanaians should include members of parliament. But how do we resolve the matter so that we don't have a very capricious executive using this vehicle to also cause unrest within the ranks of the opposition party or the minority party? We should find a better way about that. Financial autonomy for parliament. Graciously, the legislature, the Auditor General, has been given financial autonomy. But parliament is not so recognized as an arm of government. I think we must look at this. That is per Article 179, 3, 4, and 5. Then gratuities to members of parliament. Prof, these have the tendency of always causing acrimony whenever gratuities come to be awarded to members of parliament. And yet, the clear language of Article 114.1 is this. A person who has served, and I'm quoting, a person who has served as a member of parliament for a period of not less than 4 years shall be, the operative word is shall be eligible on ceasing to be a member of parliament or on his death for the payment of such gratuity to him or his personal representative, as the case may be, as shall be determined by the President acting in consultation with the committee referred to in Article 71 of this Constitution. The recommendation of the committee and the payment of gratuities have almost always generated brouhaha and ballyhoo. Often members of parliament in particular, have come under the gavel, and parliament is pushed to the precipice. Is the way forward to amend the Constitution to have one emolument regime established by a committee with the necessary inbuilt triggers to enable newly sworn-in MPs to immediately begin work on already established conditions of service, and also to avoid the periodic poisoning of the atmosphere. Then we have the Auditor General. The Auditor General is a tool for Parliament in the performance of its oversight responsibilities. Until the Auditor General submits his report on the public accounts of Ghana and of all public offices, including the courts, the central and local government administrations, of the state universities and other similar public institutions, of any public corporation or other body or organization established by an act of Parliament, to Parliament, the work of the Auditor General is incomplete. Until he submits the report to Parliament, the work of the Auditor General is incomplete. In this regard, the leakages of reports from the Auditor General to the general public before the reports come to be submitted to Parliament must be considered as rather unfortunate developments, especially given the situation where, when the reports come before the Public Accounts Committee, in many cases, when people have already been bastardized, it is found out that those people have not been given ample opportunities to respond. And then the Auditor General will come apologizing to the Public Accounts Committee, to those persons. What happens to the reputations of those people that we have torn into shreds? And again, whereas the Auditor General is a tool for Parliament in the performance of its oversight responsibilities, however, it emerged in Ghana's Constitution, Parliament is forbidden to draw the attention of the Auditor General to any suspected cases of malfeasance, to investigate and submit the report to Parliament. On the other hand, the executive that Parliament is supposed to provide oversight on is rather given the opportunity to draw the attention of the Auditor General to conduct these investigations. The President can cause the Auditor General to do that, but Parliament cannot. What kind of inverse proportion is that? So, colleagues, as I keep saying, the fault is not in our stars. And Parliament need to sit up, because oftentimes people are looking at the Auditor General. When and where the committees of Parliament are energized, they are required, immediately you allocate funds to a committee, to a sector, a ministry, department, agency, or constitutional creature. You must follow the execution of responsibility by that sector to see whether the allocations are being applied or they are being misapplied. If they are being applied conscientiously, whether as a country we have value for money. The committees don't discharge this responsibility. So we are all looking at the Public Accounts Committee, the report from the Auditor General, many of which are just post-mortem exercises. And in many cases, the people who might have misconducted themselves, after they themselves have exited, would perhaps have transitioned. They would have died. So what is the purpose of the work of the Auditor General? When the living, who are committing such grotesque malfeasance and improprieties, are not being investigated. So we need really to reposition Parliament. And repositioning Parliament requires of all of us to strengthen Parliament. Another matter that I may want to talk about, perhaps briefly, is the declaration of assets. It is not for nothing that when you declare your assets, you are required to lodge it with the Auditor General. What is the Auditor General supposed to do with it? In our Constitution, there is silence. It does appear as if when you submit your declared assets and liabilities, and I believe Dr. Aine might have submitted a lot of liabilities, not assets. A friend of mine would say, don't for instance me. So, Doc, I'm not for instancing you in vain. But you see, it's not for nothing. The Auditor General is supposed to peruse it in order to establish that you are compliant with your tax obligations. That is imperative of the Constitution. And yet, in our case, nothing is done. So somebody can go on air and say that, well, I own, the last count, I owned about 100 houses. Really? So what was your tax obligation? You have lodged your assets with the Auditor General. He cannot even investigate it. It's something that we must interrogate. Listen, gentlemen, I believe that it's imperative to remind all of us about the imperatives of Article 41 of the Constitution, which also provides that the exercise and enjoyment of rights and freedoms is inseparable from the performance of duties and obligations, and accordingly, it shall be the duty of every citizen, in particular, to promote, to uphold and defend this Constitution and law, to foster national unity and live in harmony with others. So whatever we do, as media persons, as members of Parliament, who really are creating foot soldierism in Parliament, we must ask ourselves whether what we are doing really is contributing to the sustenance of national unity and the sustenance of the national cohesion. We've spoken about employment. The relative principle of state policy is clear on that. That in employment, we should ensure that people from all regions, in a place, I've forgotten that, it even talks about ethnic groups should be properly represented in public offices. Why are we shying away? If we investigate some public offices, police, the services, armed forces, customs, preventive service, and so on, we see some ethnic groups dominating. How are we shying away? As a Champong used to say, General Champong used to say, we are one people with a common destiny in one country. And if indeed we are one country, one people with a common destiny, we should conform, we should interrogate the issues relating to the survival of the Constitution, and by that, the survival of the Republic. I believe that if we bond and bind together, we'll be able to overcome the vicissitudes, the turbulence that we are suffering in these immediate periods, we have the wherewithal to overcome turbulence and scale over these hurdles. God bless our homeland, Ghana, and make it great.